All right. Great morning, world. Great morning, humans. This is your friendly neighborhood dragon coming to you live with another edition of the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. And it's an honor and a privilege to be here. I've been doing this for quite a long time, and it never gets boring. I'm always just so we're going to talk a little bit about just becoming open and aware and curious today. And one of those things that I do is I just love to just sit in a place of gratitude. And it's just such an honor and privilege to be here. So I'm going to welcome everybody. I see that people are starting to come in on Substack and also YouTube. So I'll say great morning to you. There's Patty, miss you, Graham. Grace and greetings from New York. Greetings from Thailand, Leah. Jam sessions with Tina. Oh, man. It's interesting when you're somebody that decides and commits to doing something with regularity, because I've been doing this for years and years and years. I wonder often if the people that show up at these things know that I know and I see them. It's such a rarity in this world to come across people that do things with consistency. I try to do that myself, and I hope that people recognize that. But I notice when people do things with consistency. And what's interesting and what I've learned, along the way is that it's such a rarity that if you're somebody that says you're going to do something and commits to it and does it with consistency, where all the magic happens, that's where habits are formed and all of that stuff. New behaviors, the rewiring of your brain, and there's so much value in doing things with consistency. But I notice it, and there's very, very little competition in the world if you're somebody that does that. So I guess I just want to honor you and welcome you to the Dragon's Lair. And in the Dragon's Lair, we not only have conversations about things that make you go, we're going to do one of those today, but that's what's happening is we're in the midst of a life transformation and experiencing life. And this morning I was reminded that there's really no winning of this game called life, because we all die at the end. Sorry to be so grim, but it's what we do with our time. So just honor to be here with you guys. Honor to have the opportunity to do that. So great morning on Substack to Tally Mindy Wiener. Good to see you, Tally. Got to come by. Got to show up in the community. We miss you there. Sevak Leah is also there. She's on multiple platforms. Katie, good morning, or maybe even a great morning, Katie. Right? Why not? Right. And then you see Matthew Brownfield. There's another one that we see all the time. He says, great morning, and he uses the 8. There's Alex. See Alex all the time. Great morning to all of you. This is going to be fun. And, before we kick this off, because this is our live edition of this is a recording, a live broadcast of the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. It will air on Friday, meaning it will drop on YouTube and it'll drop in the podcast platform where the very, very large audience is there. So feel free to chime in and say hi. Jacqueline Billy. There's an interesting name, Jacqueline Billy. I like that. Could be Billy Jacqueline, right? But yeah, the more we interact, the better. And it doesn't, we're looking for insights. That's what makes it on the podcast. But sometimes human beings get a little bit confused or angry or, upset about things. Feel free to chime in with that as well. It's all good. When people ask me how I'm doing, I say it's all good, because it is all good. We're going to kind of look under some rocks today that we sometimes forget to look under. And if we do that, we never know what we're going to get when we expose ourselves. I expose myself to doing these lives all the time, and they end up being great episodes that for sure are the most highly watched episodes on the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, which today I think we're ranked number 5 in the world with that podcast, which is just crazy. But I guess that leads back to what I said before about being consistent. Um, Miss you, Graham. She says wormholes. Yes, yes, we're gonna look at some wormholes. Katie says I usually say living the dream. Yeah. What does that even mean to be living? Right. I think most people are just trying to like not die. But here we got Katie who's living the dream. Thank you for saying congrats. Yeah, I never, and just one little lesson before we start. Um, when I started my podcast, I really didn't have any projection of what it would become. It started off as a self-healing journey for me. I struggled with anxiety and things like that for most of my life, and I just decided like a fool to use a little bit of exposure therapy, and that's why I started doing these. Started off with Facebook Lives years and years and years ago, turned into the Rise Up with Dragon podcast, and then I kind of learned how to podcast, and I started the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. And all I did was I did it right, and I think my intentions with most everything that we do in the Make Sense ecosystem is structured towards taking insights and interesting things, specifically things that I find more than fascinating, helpful. Because one thing that makes me the same as you is I'm a human, you know, as far as I know. So this is really just a paying forward. And that was always the intention of this, but it just kind of caught fire. And once things look like they're moving in the right direction, then you start to wonder, say, oh wow, maybe I can do this full time. Maybe I can do this with, all the time and work from home and, be with my family more and travel more and stop trading time for money and all that stuff. So then you start getting excited and you go from amateur to pro. And it makes sense in the spirit of what this show is called. It makes sense that I find myself a full-time podcaster now, making a nice income from this. And I think anybody can do that. I think anybody here can do that. And I want to give a shout out to the folks that are in our Dragonfly Podcast Academy who have joined our school platform. And we're teaching them how to do that. We're guiding them to unlocking their creativity. You podcast curious people or people that have podcasts that just haven't figured it out. We know the blueprint for that. So if anybody ever wants to jump into the arena and let that song inside of you get shared around and see what happens, feel free to reach out and inquire about the Dragonfly Podcast Academy. Katie says, I start my MFA in media design classes today. Awesome. That's awesome, Katie. Come check out the Dragonfly Flight Academy. We've got a blueprint, teach people how to do what I'm doing right now. Magic Mika. Mika. That's awesome. My wife's name is Mika, spelt differently, but I love that. And Leah says, makes sense. So let's get into this. I'm just thrilled about this topic today. We're calling it, this is about identifying the idea that there's no coincidences. And we're calling this how to recognize and follow life's hidden signals. So today I'm going to invite you to just be a little bit more open and curious. It's funny when I ask people to do that or encourage people to do that. Some of you see the value in not being certain and not knowing things. I like to revel in uncertainty. I like to stay in this pocket where I'm always open to learning. And I find that some of the biggest challenges I have in life have come from those moments where I had an exclamation point behind sentences, where I claimed that I knew things for sure. And if you really, really learn about, life and all of the mystical things that come along with it, we really don't know. We don't know anything for sure, but we're just really good at making them up. And we're always trying to make sense of things. Katie says, I'm probably too curious. I don't know if that's a thing, but I guess if you make it a thing, it could be. But curiosity only killed, what is this? Schrodinger's? A cat in the box. Oh, Schrodinger's. Yeah, that's right. Cat in the box was open. That's right. And Jam Sessions with Tina says number 5 in the world. Yeah, isn't that nuts? You are continued proof of what happens when you are a human that leads with example and not simply saying, trust what I say. Yeah, I guess so. Success is a very, very interesting thing, Tina. And I think the more you focus on the outcome of success, the less you lead authentically. I can tell you that I got caught in what I call the authenticity trap for many, many years, in the sense that I thought that everything that I knew and who I was the end all. And I was not open and curious and not open to what else might be. And I never really got anywhere that way. So I'm always reinventing my authentic self. So great morning to Substack. We're on the live stream right now. You might be listening to this as a podcast in the edited form. Usually that'll be about 30 minutes. This will be around because we take some questions and we kind of go off on different tangents and follow rabbit holes here and there. So we'll be here for the hour, but the episode that gets edited by our amazing team will be posted and dropped on Friday of the same week that we do it. Great morning to you, Edwin Canizales. Interesting. I've never met a Canizales before. All right, so let's get into this. I want to start off today with something that you'll probably relate to, but this is something that's really, really helped me. And that's just this idea of, I just want to share what it is that I'm curious about with everything. I was just sitting out in my backyard reflecting a little bit, and it's a beautiful day and there's flowers and there's birds, and I just love to look around and just notice other things and wonder why I'm noticing them. We're going to entertain the idea that the universe and God and the divine, whatever you call it, is constantly trying to communicate with us, and sometimes we're just not listening. And a lot of the things that we say we want and the answers that we're looking for, I think by the end of this episode, you're going to see that they might already be there if you're just willing to open your mind and look and listen. So let's get this started. So one of the first things that crosses my mind when I come to these and I start seeing people like Lindsay and Edwin and Jam Sessions, Tina and Patty and all of you folks joining me, I always just kind of look at you joining me and this moment here, and I just say, just like it says on my hat, which means I'm noticing it. I'm not sure what I know about it yet. It stands for haven't made up my mind yet, but I just wonder, I don't know if you wonder about this, but I just wonder, out of the 8 billion people in the world, because we're streaming live and this is, my podcast is international, but out of the 8 billion people in this world, for some reason, the universe, God, the divine, whatever you want to call it, as I said, has put us together on this day. I don't know why you think you're here, and I don't think I know, but I'm curious about it. Is it just random? Are we here just randomly today? Did you set intentions to be here and put it in your schedule? But still, why? Is it a coincidence that carries no meaning? Or is there something bigger going on? You could be anywhere. I could be anywhere. I could decide to cancel this. I could have never started it. I could have never followed through, but here we are. As fate would have it, here we are today, which is pretty interesting to start thinking about. So the question I have is, has God, the divine, the universe, are they trying to expose us to something? Are they trying to show us something that we might not see because we're so focused on what we think? Right. So the whole concept of the make sense ecosystem and the things that we always teach and the interface response system and all of that stuff in our book, which is now on my shelf, which is crazy, just says, well, before you decide on things, consider alternative perspectives and things like that. So we're going to do that. We're going to have some fun with that today. So I think we've all had those moments, I guess we could say like we've experienced perfect timing, random meetings of people. I don't know if you are someone that pays attention to those things. Maybe that sign that you weren't even looking for, but for whatever reason, it caught your attention. You think of someone seconds before they call. Has anyone ever experienced that? You think of somebody just seconds before they call you and you go, huh, that's weird. Sometimes we have deja vu and things like that. Um, Another one would be like you find exactly what you need just when you're about to give up. That's how I met my wife, Mika. I was just about to give up on dating. I was single for about 7 years. If you ever want to hear that whole story, that is in the podcast. It's called the Dream Daughter Story. And then boom, the chances of me meeting my wife, are like winning the lotto because she didn't even live near me and all of that stuff. So it could be even like a message, I was thinking about this. It could be like a message, a person, a conversation, or maybe a song that comes on or a number. Do you guys have a number that keeps showing up and you call it your lucky number? Mine's 55. And I'm going to be 55 in July. So I guess that makes it even more special. But, these things show up with such precision and consistency that kind of deep down inside, you get this feeling, whether you act on it or not, you get this feeling like something more is happening than just a coincidence. Hey, great morning, Sandra, Ivana, Monica Dubé. Monica is on Substack and she does this thing called the Daily Lesson. You should check it out. It's really, really cool. So we're streaming on YouTube and Substack right now because I'm inviting you guys to have some interaction. And I will go back and check on those things every now and then. If it's something that's of value and it's pertinent to the topic, it'll make it on the podcast and 650,000 downloads of people will know about you. So feel free. So we usually brush these things off. This is the weird thing about humans. And I think we're always seeking comfort and we don't want to overwhelm ourselves and complicate things, but we always kind of have a tendency, I know I have, of brushing these things off and just assuming that they're random. We're going to also look at like, where do we learn to look at things that catch our attention and just call them random? But what if they're not random? We're going to play with that idea. We're going to entertain that idea that maybe they're not random. Maybe there's no such thing as coincidences. I drive my daughter to school every day and she's just got a great, great big fluffy brain. And I just asked her, I said, do you know what a coincidence is? And she says, I think so. She didn't really know what a coincidence. And I just asked her, I said, this is a 16-year-old girl. I said, do you think things just happen, by chance, or do you think that they have a bigger meaning? And she says, right? She's my daughter. And Katie, you're not turning into chatty Cathy. That's great. I love chatty Cathys. But I said, do they have meaning? And she goes, yeah, I think they do. So I think we all kind of like play with that, but we have this tendency of like brushing them off and just getting on with our day and handing the keys of trust over to this like day that's like happening to us, right? We like to play in this sandbox with the idea that, the day's not happening to us. We can play and say the day's happening potentially for us, but we're talking about you engaging with the day in the sense that you can reshape it, reshape reality, become a reality bender. So what if these things that are happening are actually signals? They're messages. It's like mail, right? So today I want to explore the possibility that there are no coincidences. So if you really struggle with that, this is not the right episode for you. We're just going to entertain the alternative perspective that there are no coincidences. We're not challenging anybody's religious beliefs or anything. We're just saying maybe, one of our favorite words, that there are no coincidences and that many of the meaningful moments in your life may actually be invitations and nudges that are trying to move you from living by accident. Are you living by accident? To a place where you're living with awareness and maybe learning that you have a lot more potential. You have the ability to make things happen a little bit more than you thought you did. So it's based on this idea that perhaps the greatest tragedy in life is not thinking that life has failed you or failed to guide you in life. Sometimes we get like that. We suck our thumb. But that no one ever taught us to really pay attention. I don't know about you, but I didn't learn that in school. I didn't learn I learned how to pay attention to the teacher that was telling me what I should know. But nobody ever told me to daydream, to let my mind wander in school. Take note of that. In fact, whenever I was daydreaming or wandering, my parents, my mother, father, teacher, preacher, society always said like, "Hey, get your shit together. Get back on track here." Um, so it's no wonder that we brush these things off because we've kind of been trained to not allow ourselves to do that. And I've talked a lot about the fact that we're this species that doesn't allow ourselves to get bored anymore. I don't know if you take note of that. Um, I think it's important to be bored. I think some of the most creative insights and that place of being open and curious happens most when we're bored because school didn't teach us that. So consider that about school. School taught us how to memorize facts. I mean, from what I understand, unless you had a really great teacher. And oh man, maybe you need to reach out if they're still alive and thank that really, really great teacher. Maybe you are that teacher. We were taught to follow rules, how to color inside the lines and conform systems or conform to systems that were built by people who themselves often walk through life unconsciously. We've been taught systems by people that don't look around so much, walking through life unconsciously and not really taking note of the bigness or the potential bigness of what lies within them. So school didn't teach us how to trust our intuition. You had to figure that out on your own, or maybe you had a mentor that told you, go with your gut. I mean, I never had a teacher that told me how to answer questions on a test by saying, like, just go with your gut. Now they said study and learn and know. And that's where the secret is. They didn't teach us to notice patterns in our lives. That's another interesting thing. Is anybody out there the kind of person that looks up and looks at architecture and shapes and things like that? And maybe off in the distance, we look at nature and we start to notice that there's a pattern happening. There's patterns everywhere if you start noticing, and recognizing the meaningful timing in things, or even just focus on timing. My daughter said to me the other day, she goes, "Time is strange." And I'm like, "What's strange about it?" And she's like, "Well, it's like always happening." And it's just like, she said something like, "What I just said to you is now in the past." And I'm like, "That's an amazing observation." She's awakened. But we're recognizing the meaningful timing of things, or maybe even interpreting the signals in the universe, with that maybe God has kind of like been constantly offering us. I like to look at the world and life and just say, why has that been left behind for me to see? Like there's clues. I used to play this game when I was a kid called Myst, MYST. And to get through the game, you had to like turn every rock over and find these clues because you might need a code to get through some sort of secret door or something. I like to look at life like that. And if you're someone today, and I'm also encouraging you to maybe be that someone, but if you're someone today that is beginning to kind of wake up to the possibility that everything is connected. Some of you are like that, and some of you might just be allowing yourself, or some of you might be having an awakening of that right now, and that everything is kind of connected together. Be patient with yourself. You know, that's another thing about it. The moment that you start to like take a left instead of a right, recognize that it takes a lot of time to convince the captain of the oil tanker, that 120,000 ton oil tanker. It takes time to convince that captain to turn around and consider a completely different route than the one that it's been taking and traveling for the duration of its life. Isn't that interesting? If you entertain a different way of looking at things, can you see how you will very, very quickly be rerouted back on course? We always kind of go back to familiar, and we talk a lot about that. And perhaps that new route begins with just one dangerous question that you can ask yourself today. What if there are no coincidences? You'd have to be able to entertain that. What if I don't know everything? What if there's more? So if you're in that space right now, You're powerful, man. You're powerful. And, I just want to give a disclaimer. This is not to say that if you've set your sights on something, a course, that you shouldn't see it through and follow through. But I just think it's healthy. Adam Grant wrote a book called Think Again. And what he's basically saying is it's very healthy to think again, right? We're taught to not be like indecisive. We're taught to be certain and just stay the course and never quit. And there is some value to that, but are you the kind of person that entertains what else? Right? So ask that question. What if there are no coincidences? So ancient civilizations, when I did some work on this, ancient civilizations didn't call those moments that we're talking about coincidences. They actually called them things like omens and signs and messages, or maybe even divine guidance. The Egyptians and the Greeks and the Mayans and the indigenous cultures believed life itself was constantly communicating through patterns and symbols. And we know this from all these digs, right? Patterns and symbols to those open and aware enough to listen. I mean, like, has anyone noticed that if you go back in time and we start to uncover things like how the pyramids were built and stuff like that, we see that there must have been some sort of technology that might even be more advanced than us in our advanced state. Has anyone ever noticed that? I've gone to Peru several times and I've, in the Sacred Valley, and I've gone to these amazing, Machu Picchu and all that stuff. And God, I don't know if we can pull together on Machu Picchu today with all of our technology. So modern society calls this stuff luck or chance or randomness. Statistical probability is something that we rely on. So I was asking myself, has progress, all this progress that we're so connected to, we're seeking efficiency and speed and all of that stuff. I had a great talk with my buddy Jim Quick a couple nights ago. Any Jim Quick fans out there? And we were just talking about what's happening with AI and all of that stuff. And things are really about to start speeding up. If you have your finger on the pulse of that, with all of this agentic stuff and all these agents doing things better than humans and all that. And we know that like AI is not going to take over humanity. It's the humans that work with it are going to take over the people that don't. But we were just looking at that idea that, you know, we better get our shit together as humans. We better become more conscious and aware and in some sort of way reclaim control, or else, because what we're doing is we're relinquishing the control. So modern society is kind of like trained us to think as this chance and luck and randomness, statistical probability, right? Has progress, all this stuff, made us smarter? I'd love to know your answer to this. Has progress made us smarter or have made us deaf? Has progress become so progressive that it's trained us to keep our mouths shut? Katie says, yes, nope, too expensive. I see all these. Let me get in YouTube here and see what you guys are saying. Oh, Modern Hero Stories is here. From your perspective, do you think labeling something as a coincidence is a practical way to avoid overthinking? That's powerful. There's a podcast, additive from Modern Hero Stories. From your perspective, do you think labeling something as a coincidence is a practical way, a strategic, maybe even way of avoiding overthinking? Or does it potentially overlook deeper? Well, I mean, I would assume that you're overlooking deeper connections because it would relinquish you from having to reroute your course. I think we get very, very scared of figuring out that everything that we've built our identity on might not be true, like religion and even political views, or whatever mask you're wearing in life. You get very comfortable with it, and when these things start to happen, these potentially magical things, and we just say, oh, that's just a coincidence, right? There's no deeper meaning. Yes, you're right. I think that the strategy behind that, and that might be coming from our subconscious to keep us safe, is just to say like, hey, let's not take on too much here. Let's just have a good day. So that's great. Makes sense. Operations. That's so cute. That is my amazing partner and assistance, the director of Make Sense Operations. She says, I agree. Modern hero stories, things do happen for a reason. And thank you for sharing your experience. Well, thank you. Okay, awesome. Let's get back on track. So Carl Jung, any Carl Jung fans out there? Carl Jung gave this phenomenon that we're talking about a name. He called them synchronicities. Now I have a whole chapter in my book, Makes Sense: How to Rewire Your Mind and Transform Your Life. Uh, Synchronicities is something that I've been following. In fact, my whole life has been following and seeking meetings. I'm a big fan of all of that stuff. So he defined synchronicities as meaningful coincidences without having an apparent causal relationship. Isn't that interesting? So, in other words, what Jung was saying is events that appear unrelated on the surface. See, that's the problem is we look at the surface. Events that appear to be unrelated on the surface potentially carry undeniable personal meaning beneath. What a fun way to look at life. If you can't entertain that something has underlying meaning beneath, what does that say about life? It means that you're just watching a movie rather than acknowledging that you're participating in creating that movie. So Jung believes synchronicities often appear during periods of transformation. This is really cool. During times of uncertainty, awakening, and identity shifts, moments when you're becoming fully yourself. That may be when I came across that again for the 12th time, but it just made me go, isn't that interesting to chew on right there? What he's saying. What he's saying is he's asking us to consider: do synchronicities, signs, clues, and this potential guidance system that I'm entertaining here with you today show up more often? You tell me. Does it show up more often when we're leaning into the discomfort and inconvenience of life and growth? I mean, think about it. We're all saying the obstacles away, lean into the uncomfortable. I just told somebody that this morning. I said, just make sure, because all of a sudden we get this idea that we're on our way. We figured it out. And all we've really done sometimes, and I'm speaking for myself only, is we got comfortable with something. Sometimes we mistake comfort with direction. So I think it's important to be uncomfortable. The Stoics called it voluntary discomfort. Why? Well, for many reasons, but what we're playing with today is that that's where all the magic potentially happens. I mean, like for anybody that's tried plant medicine, that's not a good time. You're not having fun when you're doing something like ayahuasca, but you have these massive breakthroughs on the other side of like really hard times. I like to play with that because I don't know about you, but this idea that life sucks and then you die, it's kind of true, you know, not in a bad way, but it means that for the most part, I would say life's been tough and full of hard lessons. And I have this tendency of focusing on the good stuff and keeping my eye on the prize in the future and not staying in the present moment. But if it is true, and I think it is, we have to learn how to embrace the suck. We have to learn how to dance in the rain, right? So this raises an even deeper this thing with this idea of playing hard and going through hard times and leaning into that and saying maybe that's where all of these things happen most, maybe. It raises a deeper question. If these are messages, if we start entertaining that this stuff is not just random, they're not coincidences, and they're messages, synchronicities, who or what is sending them? Now, I don't know what you guys think about that stuff, but if we are getting messages, who or what is sending them? Where are they coming from? Human beings, right? If you're getting a message, I mean, you could say God, you could say the universe, you could say the divine, if that's your thing, if that's your blueprint. But when I start to notice these things, I don't just look for the lesson in them. I say, where did that come from? Did it come from somewhere else? Or maybe it was already there. Maybe it's tucked away in your subconscious mind. Maybe we're so focused that there's some sort of powerful entity out there trying to communicate things with us that we're forgetting that Maybe we were born with some of these things, playing with the idea of destiny and calling and all of that stuff. I love to get to know myself a little bit more. So some believe synchronicities arrive from your subconscious mind, that your deeper awareness, has this ability to notice patterns before your conscious mind catches up. What that means is that there's a whole world of things going on in your brain without you knowing it, happening before your conscious mind, your prefrontal cortex, your CEO, that goes, that's interesting. What this is saying is these things already exist and they're happening before you know it. So, what's the value of becoming open and curious and aware? Well, you tap into these things a little bit more because when you're open and curious and you're not fixed and closed minded, then you have this ability to look at other things. And we're doing that right now. So, some believe that that's where synchronicities come from. So others believe that they emerge from a collective unconsciousness, a shared field of mind connecting all of us. What do you guys think about that? Does everybody here agree that we're all connected, or do you think you're separate and unique, better or worse than everybody? Or are we all just interconnected? I like to look at us kind of like extensions of nature, but we're just wireless, right? Because if you look under the soil, nature's all connected here to the other side of the planet. But once we're above ground, we start to think that we're special. I think we're just wireless. we're just a form of the same thing, and we're just wireless. I'm writing a whole book on that, by the way. So others believe that that's where it comes from, the collective unconsciousness, that we're all connected. I like that because I'm currently of the persuasion. I like to say things like that. I'm currently of the persuasion that consciousness, this hard problem of consciousness, I'm currently under the persuasion that consciousness lives in the space between all things. That means that consciousness is living in the space between you and I, me and this microphone, in the space, not in my brain. My brain is a device that can either tap into it and communicate with it or not. That's what I'm of the persuasion of right now. I'm by far not telling you that's what it is. But in the space between all things and the open and curious person, are you getting the idea that there's maybe some value in entertaining becoming an open and curious person? The open and curious person, or maybe we can call it a more conscious person, is simply somebody that has greater access to that space. The rest, the herd, are focused on the noise. There's a lot of noise in the world right now. Are you with me? Right? Lots and lots of noise. And if you're focused on the noise, you're missing the signal. You're not tuned into the right frequency that you might need to be tuned into. So all of a sudden you become open and curious, and you're practicing gratitude, and you're unwrapping the present moment, or you're meditating, or you're doing all these wonderful things, breath work or whatever, or I have this plant medicine experience, and boom, we have this epiphany. Is that something that was on the outside that we had to go find? Or is that just this moment where we have this ability to look inward and see what already is? I love that. So religious traditions often interpret these things as divine providence, guidance from God. Now, I have no idea what is right and wrong because I haven't made up my mind about anything, but I know that I make stuff up all the time and that feels right and feels good. That's why I kind of pause and I run the interface response system and I say, well, wait a second now. What else might be true? I allow myself to entertain what else might be true. I love that. Skeptics would say that they're merely coincidences. Skeptics, right? Skeptics. I've been a skeptic a great deal of my life about certain things. They're merely coincidences combined with a pattern recognition of the brain's tendency to assign meaning. So I do think that our brains are meaning-making machines. So what we know about the science of the brain is that we have a tendency of not knowing everything. So what we do, and we use this from our pattern recognitions and our memories and all of this stuff that we learned in our formative years and society and all that stuff that we're consuming all the time, which makes us assuming it all the time. We have a tendency of filling in the gaps of what we don't know with what we've been taught. So Even if I'm like devout and like going through a phase of my life where it's all about religion and God and things like that, and I'll justify it and stand for myself. I've just learned to just say, well, what else might be true? So do I claim to know this stuff for certain? No, right? As you know, I haven't made up my mind about anything, and I revel in uncertainty. In fact, I'm at this place in my life where very often people come at you. When you start to rise in life, that whole hate you because they ain't you, because I've done that to people as well. A lot of people come to try to take me down, and they'll say mean things to me or call me names or something. I'm at the point now where I don't even discount that. I go, well, listen, if I am an asshole or if I am what you say you are or I'm full of shit, please explain. I don't know who you are. Explain to me what you mean. Go a little bit further on that because I'm not certain of anything. Maybe you're right. And of course, what happens in that conversation is you realize that that had nothing to do with you. It's just somebody like picking you to vent on. But are you willing to entertain the idea that something that you discount might be? It's just fun. It's fun. So do you believe that the mind, catch this, do you believe that the mind is merely an active observer of reality? Do you think that your mind is just something you use to observe reality? Or do you think that the mind is an active participant in the shaping of reality? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that you play a role in shaping reality? Close your eyes and tell me what happens to reality. It's just a thought and a projection, right? But as soon as you open your eyes and you start looking at things, your making a sense making machine and your meaning making machine starts to go around and make sense of things. But what you don't realize, and this is why the interface response system in my book is so important and valuable, you don't realize that your meaning making machine is using its software, its program, its code to do all that stuff. So, do you believe that the mind is merely an active observer of reality or a participant in the shaping of reality? So, is reality a movie that you watch or a movie that you're involved in production? I love that idea. I put that out on a post the other day. And the reason why we're doing this is because if you answer that question in a certain way, it changes everything. If the mind only is an observer, then what happens is in that moment, you're accepting the fact that life is just happening to you. And we got a lot of great personal growth books that say life's not happening to you, it's happening for you. And we all say, yeah, amen. But how often are you playing that way by those rules or open to it? If life is happening to you right now, it's because you think that you're just observing life and you don't have a say in it. And I know a lot of you out there know that you do have a say in it. I can decide if I'm going to have a good day today or not. I can decide if something's going to bother me long term or not. I mean, I do have my stress response system and I do have my programming just like all of you. I freak out if somebody says something mean to me or if I get an unexpected bill or somebody gives me the finger or my visceral stress response system does the same thing that yours does. But what I do is I say, interesting. What else might be true? So that's what the interface response system will help you with. But if the mind is a participant, if we're acknowledging and playing with that in the shaping of reality, then suddenly your thoughts, beliefs, attention, awareness, expectations, and emotional state become variables in the equation. What that means is that everything's up for having a look at if you play. It's like the red pill versus the blue pill. That's the choice. You could just go back to handing the keys of trust over to the world and letting the things happen as they may. And maybe that's why you believe in a governing force out there, because like say, God will show me the way, the divine will show me the way. What that's saying is I don't have to worry about like figuring all this stuff out. There's a guiding force taking me along, kind of like the current in a river. Um, And if that's working for you, then that's great. I'm in this space right now where I'm questioning things and having fun with it. So if that's true, perhaps synchronicities are not random at all. That's what we're having fun with today. So perhaps synchronicities are actually evidence that your inner world and your outer world are more interconnected than you thought. So what we're saying is that this outer world idea where all this magic is happening, we're entertaining the idea that we have a say in it, that we're part of the equation. And maybe we're entertaining now that they're more interconnected than we had thought. So whenever I say, what do you think? Where does that come from? Is that 100% you thinking about it? Or did other things and people and events in your life have a say in it as well? The mainstream science often suggests that this is merely an illusion, what we're talking about, created by the brain's faulty, incomplete perception. We shared that a little bit. So there were, sorry, that we are vulnerable to false meaning and making, false meaning making and pattern seeking. We're constantly trying to figure things out in a way that we forget that things are not really figure outable. We're trying to create like something that feels right to get through this day. So we don't want to question everything. And I don't question everything, but I give myself permission to. I like to get comfortable sometimes and do stupid shit. So it also entertains that we're vulnerable to false meaning making. That's why we do the interface response system when we pause and we question things, because we know that that's a possibility. So let me ask you this. Have you noticed or been exposed to the fact that the entire universe appears to be built on patterns and interconnected structures? So here's what we know. Well, I shouldn't say what we know. Here's the best information that we have. Call it science or whatever. But if you really tap into this, you'll see that nature outside, all this amazing nature, if you really look deep in it, and I know some of you know this, follows fractal geometry. So we're starting to see that everything has a pattern. Planetary systems out there move in mathematical or move with mathematical precision. This is what the smart people tell you, and they know this. Even human DNA is encoded with repeating sequences. How do I know this? Because we're able to actually duplicate it now. So everything that we observe in existence, everything, including what we're doing right now, everything that we observe in existence appears to function through patterns, cycles, systems, and relationships. So why would the human experience that we're talking about be any different? Why do we think that our thoughts and our feelings and our perceptions of things and what we think about things is separate and unique and different from the overall structure and patterns that we see in the universe? Isn't that interesting how we think that? Let me see. Ivana says, the more I listen to you, oh, this is dangerous. This could be a jab or a compliment. The more I listen to you, the more I am questioning myself. So for years I've been telling my kids to embrace the suck, right? Kids don't really understand what that means completely. So we have to go a little further. And I was convinced that it was a me thing. And I just heard you saying the same thing. Isn't that interesting? Well, here's another fun thing that we could say about that, Ivana. And I think that's Ivana that I met with at the gym quick talk, right? So if that's you, welcome. Great morning to you. So let's look at this idea of looking at things the wrong way and making mistakes or making distinctions. This would give you permission to entertain that there's a pattern to that too. I mean, can you see that there's a pattern to the healthy things and unhealthy things that we do? But what we're just doing is we're playing with this idea that we're entertaining the idea that there's a pattern. And the reason why we want to do that is because it allows you to start looking at things differently. Remember what Wayne Dyer says. It's one of the tenets of our Make Sense ecosystem. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. What we're doing now is we're allowing ourselves to execute on that. and change the way we look at things. That's what the interface response system's for. It's giving you the ability to look at things from alternative perspectives rather than the known. So everybody says growth takes place outside the comfort zone. I like to say that growth takes place outside the comfort known. The most uncomfortable zone is outside the comfort known, and that's called the comfort or the unknown, right? That's the unknown. That's why we fear the unknown. But if somebody's in massive growth right now, they're not afraid of the unknown. We're going to talk about superpowers and like gifts that you were given, when you were born next week, and that'll help you kind of figure yourself out a little bit. So why would humans be any different? So why would we somehow be excluded from the governing architecture of the universe? And why would our thoughts, feelings, emotions, and relationships and life experiences not follow the same underlying structure? Are we that unique and different? Or is everything connected? Maybe, maybe. And if you can't acknowledge that and you can't entertain that, well, life is happening to you. Or maybe you're kind of like middle road. In Buddhism, they talk about neither here nor there. Maybe you're in the middle of two things, entertaining both sides. That's healthier. And by the way, this stuff is exhausting, like for you to contemplate everything. We like to go through life a little bit on cruise control. It's kind of nice to not think and stuff like that. But we're just playing with the idea of, can you allow yourself to do that? So perhaps synchronicities are evidence of that design. Perhaps these things that show up like synchronicities are evidence of that design, or at the very least, they are compelling evidence that would validate us taking a look at things, entertaining that. So what I've found is that those who reject the possibility of synchronicities and think that everything is just like random coincidences, those that reject the possibility of synchronicity and interconnectedness, all of that stuff outright, often do so not because they have disproven it, but because for whatever reason, right, it's due to their, mother, father, teacher, preacher, they won't allow it. They simply won't allow it. Isn't that funny? How there could be like this broad horizon of all this magical stuff out there. There could be more. What else is there? Maybe uncertainty, all of that. How we have this ability to not allow it. I won't allow it. Now, what's the platform that we use to not allow things? Our conditioning, our beliefs. Yeah. So Matthew Brownfield is saying, well, it's fear. Right? Well, what is fear? What are we afraid of? We're afraid of the unknown, right? We're afraid that our known is incorrect. We're not completely as strong and foundational as we thought or as we were taught. Just recognizing that thought and taught sounds similar. So perhaps certainty closes more doors than ignorance ever could. We got to duplicate that. Perhaps certainty closes more doors than ignorance ever could. What did you learn about being ignorant? Well, in that sense, I understand what it is that we're probably not wanting to do. But what I'm saying is uncertainty and how ignorance could, open more doors. And maybe that's why modern culture is so quick to dismiss all of this, because they don't want to be ignorant. I think I'm calling myself ignorant right now. Teach them, and this is, by the way, this is what society does. And I'm not blaming anybody because I don't think anybody's conscious of this, even the powers that be. Because if you want to control a population or a large group of people, the first step that we have to take is to make sure that they never discover their own power. Never discover. If I make sure that you never discover your own power and I control you, I mean, that's how I start. If I want to start a cult, that's how I'll do it. But I need to teach you not to trust your intuition. Silly rabbit, tricks are for kids. Never let them believe that they can think for themselves deeply enough to question the system. That's how you control people. And people will support that. Never let them realize that they may have access to a guidance beyond the approved channels of society. Because the moment somebody truly begins to tune in to that day, right? If you guys go tune into this day just even a little bit and start trusting or even entertaining your perception and noticing those patterns, life may actually mean something bigger. So this gives a whole new meaning to those of you that think you're stuck. And also, this becomes when you start playing with this stuff, you become a lot harder to control. So if you feel like you're being controlled in life right now, well, this is why. Some people would call this becoming unfuckwithable. And it's just about you thinking for yourself in a world that's doing the thinking for you. Now, before anyone thinks that I've lost my mind and I've gone completely off the rails, let me acknowledge the rational perspective here. So there are scientific explanations for all of this: pattern recognition, confirmation bias, selective attention, subconscious processing, all of that stuff. There's the reticular activating system, right? Where our brain has this ability. Like you go look at a red car and you see red cars all over the place. But here's the question. Even if synchronicities are simply your subconscious surfacing information before your conscious awareness catches up, which is what we said before, does that make them any less valuable? So if your deeper mind is recognizing opportunities, warnings, connections, and patterns before you do, well, that's still guidance and intelligence, isn't it? Do you can you see that there's a guidance system? When you start playing with things like intuition and your gut, like what do you think that is? Do you think that that's like your brain doing that? Or is there something bigger happening? Maybe we already have all the answers. Maybe we've just gotten caught up and scattered in all of the outside noise. It's still guidance and intelligence. Is this not worth paying attention? Well, it depends on your state right now. But I think a lot of you are probably saying this is worth paying attention to. This is where the interface response system comes in. And I think we've talked about that. You know, the first step that you'd want to do is become more aware and perceive with an entertaining mindset that there's a pattern. Perceive the pattern. Then, from an open and curious place, step 2, you're going to pause instead of just simply dismissing it. You're just going to allow yourself to do that. If you typically dismiss things, you go, deja vu, huh? You know, I just saw that person get out of the car and then 5 hours later, they're sitting next to me. Got this feeling. That's weird. I just thought of that person and the phone rang. If you just dismiss that as a coincidence, right? You're just going to start saying, maybe. Then after that, step 3, you're going to process what it may be trying to tell you. Here's my live throat clear. Process what it may be trying to tell you and simply ask questions about it and entertain alternative perspectives. Why won't we allow that? Why won't we allow ourselves to entertain alternative perspectives and then simply proceed? That's how we make a conscious response versus a reaction. Proceed accordingly in support of your goals and dreams. So this is how you stop living by accident and start living with awareness. So imagine this for a second. We're coming to the end. Imagine discovering that there has been a shoebox full of letters and mail hidden under your bed your entire life. Letters containing direction, reassurance, warning, encouragement, and reminding you of who you are and why you're here and what you're meant to do. But nobody ever told you they were there. Or you never allowed yourself to look under the bed. That might be why synchronicities, that might be what synchronicities are. They might be mail from the universe, messages from your subconscious, signals from life itself. So the point remains the same. Perhaps life is trying to help you more than you realize. Sometimes I suck my thumb and think that life's giving me an unfair shake. Maybe life is trying to help us more than we realize, even in the suck. Perhaps the reason that so many people remain lost, stressed, overwhelmed, and disconnected is not that guidance is absent. The way is absent, but more so because they never learned how to listen to it. And we said in the beginning that we don't learn that in school. So I'm going to leave you guys with this. What patterns, and I'll stick around even though we're at the top of the hour. If anybody has any questions, want to add something, go ahead. I'm going to look at the chat. What patterns in your life keep showing up that you may have been too distracted to give some time, energy, and focus to or notice? I think you know what that is. Because maybe the signs that you've been waiting for and praying for and hoping for have already arrived. That's the space. That's the space that we're in. So if this episode, and I always say at the end, if you learned something today, give it away. Well, first of all, if you learned something today, put it in play for yourself, but then give it away because that's the only way it's going to stay. What's going to happen to most of you is these ideas, if you had any sort of epiphanies, you're about to walk out into the world and it's powerful. You know, the herd and society and our desire to fit in and all of that stuff and do a good job and mother, father, teacher, preacher, society, evolution, all that stuff. It's more powerful than you know. You might right now think things are going to change today. And an hour later, you're going to say, what did he say? So it's important, I think, to write some of these things down. Maybe just take one of them and play with it today. So if you learn something today, give it away, put it in play, give it away. That's how it's going to stay. And we'll see you next time on that. This episode we'll post on Friday. So let's see what some folks, oh my God, we have a lot of stuff here. I'm going to go from the bottom. I believe our soul, this is Jam Sessions Tina. I believe that our soul resides in our brain. Interesting. And its lens is created through the soul's influence through our belief system. Interesting. Modern Heroes is agreeing. Makes sense operations. Let's see what she says. Remember, if you learn something today, give it away. That's the only way it's going to stay. Yes, affirm that. Let's see what we got. Ivana, I am confused right now. Okay, great. Are you saying intuition is a good or a bad thing? So first of all, I'm not saying, Ivana, that anything's good or bad. You get to decide that. And I'm not saying what intuition is. What I'm saying is you can either look at intuition as kind of a coincidence that an outside force caused, or you can entertain. That's all we're doing, Ivana, is we're entertaining that intuition might be a guidance system that's always been there, right? Like, and we played around with the idea of where does it happen more? Intuition, synchronicities, and all of that stuff. I don't think anything, Ivana, is a good or a bad thing. Because I'm open and curious. And when you're open and curious, you recognize that all things carry value. All things. Remember, we were talking about if life does suck and then you die, meaning that for the most part, life is challenging and sucky and hard, and you want to enjoy your lifetime here, because we only get one, then you would have to learn how to embrace the suck and enjoy it, right? So right there, I don't call anything good or bad, and I don't think that they're, without light, without darkness, there's no light. Without bad, there's no good. So I don't think there's any value in labeling them. I'm just trying to show you that maybe what you thought about intuition, maybe there's another meaning for it. Maybe there's another one. And you can start playing with this. For me, I'm of the persuasion, and I like entertaining the fact that everything happens for a reason. I can't prove it. I love synchronicities. I love thinking about it and entertaining all sorts of alternative perspectives and from vantage points, and just saying, which one do I like the best? And why do I like it? And why is Katie here? And why is Savak here? In my experience, the more I listened to and trusted my intuition, the more accurate it became. Interesting. That's a great insight, Savak. What Savak is saying is the more we allow ourselves to do this stuff and play, it almost becomes training. Like we build a muscle around it and it becomes more efficient. That's kind of our second tenet, Savak. We say it's who you are that determines how well what you do works. That means that if you're doing and doing and doing and not getting anywhere, it might be who you are, not what you're doing. So what Savak is saying, which I think is great, is that the more we work on ourselves, the better results we'll get. I love that. Beautiful. What else do we have? Mish says, I got the time difference slightly wrong. Is this recorded? Yes, it is. So Mish, you'll be able to get this. First of all, this episode will be edited and on the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, number 5 in the world right now. That'll be on Friday, that episode. So that's the cleaned up, edited version. But also we're streaming on Substack and YouTube right now. And our amazing team will be editing the video and all that stuff and making shorts of it and everything like that. So yes, 100% recorded. Steve Berger's here. Ivana, hope you're not confused. Let me know and if you got it. We are entering another age of enlightenment. Well, that's an interesting thing. I think we're always entering another age of enlightenment. But this is kind of what I was talking about with my conversation with Jim Quick. Another thing that I observe, because what she's saying is we're entering a new stage of awakening and enlightenment. Enlightenment is like something that we're receiving, we're getting to this next level of consciousness and awareness. And I agree, but at the same time, the paradox is that we're also diving deeper into relinquishing our cognition to technology. So there's a whole other faction of people that will not be, the enlightenment is still here and the opportunity is still here, but a lot of people are dumping their cognition to technology and they're not thinking. A lot of people are using large language models and thinking that they're partnering with it, but more and more, they're giving more and more of it away. I think that it's really, if you're working with AI, I think that the only thing that you have still is the creativity of your prompt and all of that. And I love using AI for different things, just like I used Google or Grammarly or something like that. But I spend a lot of time writing first. If you guys are on Substack, I have a something called Good Shift. My paid subscribers get it every day, but that's stuff that I write every day and I just kind of dump it. It's like a journal entry of sorts. I think journaling is really, really powerful, really, really cool. Let's see. The polished, that's my amazing partner. The polished and edited version is going to be uploaded at 2 p.m. That's the YouTube version. The podcast comes out in the morning. All right. We've been here long enough. Thank you so much. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. I'm wearing my Albany Great Danes shirt because we just made the national tournament in lacrosse. I played lacrosse when I was in college. So go Danes. Love and appreciate you all. Thanks so much for this opportunity for me to get my thoughts out. It helps me further own them. I hope that you'll follow our Substack. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is just fantastic. Our team's putting out just amazing content. If you're not already following the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, please do so. Leave us a rating on our YouTube, comments, and share it around and on our podcast, everything that makes such a difference. And for those of you that follow me on Substack, you know that I almost borderline obsessively put out content. So I hope that you're enjoying that. And remember, if you want to start a podcast and do what I'm doing for a lot of money full-time, reach out to me. Check out the Dragonfly Flight Academy, which is where we're teaching people to do that. And a lot of you guys are here. I see that. So love and appreciate you. Have an amazing day. And I'm going to go be with my family now. Love you. See you next week. Bye-bye.